Hey, how are you?
Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome to day 14 of EWEI's International Conference. My name is Rachel Ubunna. I will be your anchor for today. So today, the major theme for our discussion is leadership. And before we go into anything, I would want to see how active participants are and attendees. So I would want you to drop in the comments section, what quality do you think a good leader should possess? What quality do you think a good leader should possess? For me, I think a very important quality a good leader should possess is approachability. A good leader should be approachable so that people who he or she is leading can easily communicate with him or her. So what qualities do you think a good leader should possess? You can drop that in the comment section. Abdullahi says empathy. Yes, empathy is a good quality a leader should possess, and everybody should possess empathy. Ketsura, patience. Jalila, a good leader should be open-minded. Very true. A good leader should be open-minded. Yes, you can keep your comments in the chat box while we proceed with our session. So as I said, our theme for today is leadership. So all conversations we'll be having today would revolve around the theme of leadership. Maureen says interpersonal communication and relationships. Yes, that is a good quality a leader should possess. Okay, so as we proceed, we have our speaker. Our speaker is very much ready to have us. And Rick Torseth is here. He's our speaker for today. So you can join through our Woover platform where you can communicate with our speaker if you have questions, comments, and other participants as well. We equally be streaming live on Facebook, and you can equally access our videos, recorded sessions on our YouTube channel. Uche says emotional intelligence. Yes, that is a very good quality. Thank you so much, participants, for joining. This is day 14 of EWEI's International Conference. It has been a long and exciting and educative process for all of us. Maureen says responsibility and dependability. Yeah, that is really nice. Yes. I really think a good leader should be proactive. So as our session is about to commence, I'll take the next 2 minutes to read the bio of our speaker, Rick Torseth, and then he would proceed with his session. Rick Torseth. For 25 years, Rick has been coaching and consulting leaders who work in fast-changing environments and who face wicked problems. Leaders of these types of organizations and societies have extreme influence on people. In turn, The people who they influence touch the lives of a multitude of others and thus have a broad-reaching impact. These leaders have the responsibility to design, build, and guide organizations that both do good in the world and do well by the people who they're while solving big, messy problems. RIC's client focus includes non-governmental organizations, healthcare, and governmental organizations, foundations, and social enterprises. He helps develop leaders in these sectors because they are addressing our most pressing global challenges that challenge our most impactful leaders: climate change, global health, and peace building anchor interactable wicked problems. RIC has helped develop leaders and facilitated problem-solving teams within the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Global Health, Global Development, and US programs sector for over 11 years. He has designed and co-facilitated leadership programs and coached individuals and groups in the UK's local government, NGOs, foundations, and large US healthcare systems. He has been a keynote speaker and plenary facilitator for industry groups. RIC holds a master's in science and consulting and coaching for change from the Said Business School at Oxford University and HEC Paris. He is the current chair of the Change Leaders Alumni Group affiliated with the Consulting and Coaching for Change program. RIC heads a leadership consulting and coaching practice based in the US and is a partner in Impact Basis, a Netherlands-based consulting and leadership coaching firm focused on helping organizations execute social change. RIC lives with his wife, Teresa, and 2 cats in Oxford, UK. He rides his bike with a goal of submitting as many of the Tour de France climbs as he can. Thank you so much, RIC, for joining us. It's really exciting to have you, and I'm glad you love cats. You can go ahead with your session.
Oh, Rachel, thank you very much. I feel a little embarrassed for having given you all that information. I should have toned that down a little bit. Sorry. One question before we get started. Do I have sharing rights to the screen?
Yes, you do have the right to the screen, so you can share your slides.
Okay, great. Thank you everybody for attending. My name is Rick Torseth. I am in Oxford right now. Thank you for having me. I have been a participant in this event for the last week or so, eavesdropping into conversations and also participating in some of the chat conversations. My thinking in doing that was, one, I wanted to get a sense of who was attending this conference and what kind of work you were doing and what kinds of challenges you're facing. So it's been quite informative for me. I think perhaps some of the information based on what I heard over the last week or so that I will share may be new information for some, familiar information for others. My purpose here and my purpose in my work is to help people who've made a decision to lead in doing that work in some really intractable conditions in the world so they can build their capacity to have greater impact. I'm going to note that the conference's objectives here is to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG number 5, which is gender equality. It goes without saying that gender equality has been a challenge for the globe for a long, long time. It's a reason it's on this list. And so I'm mindful that a lot of you come to this conference with that orientation in mind. My goal here today is not just to provide you with some information, but it's also to challenge you to begin to think about some specific actions you might take coming out of this conversation that we're going to have this morning. So I'm going to begin by putting you to work, if you don't mind. Let me... So the screen sharing is disabled, but I'm not able to. Hang on a second here, if you don't mind. Let's see if this helps us.
Okay, I think you should try sharing your screen again.
Yeah, here we go. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I'd like for you to do. I would like for you in the chat to answer these three questions. What is the mission of your organization, wherever you're coming from, whatever place you're choosing to spend your time in doing your work? What is the mission of that organization? What impact do you seek? And that can be either at the organizational level, or it could be personally for you in your role in the organization. What impact do you seek to have? And what is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now in your work? So mission, impact, and biggest challenge. So I'll give you a minute or two to put some stuff in here.
Okay, I think you should still probably put that slide up so others joining can equally guess the questions. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
So Rachel, can the participants speak? Are they muted?
Yes, they are muted, so they would send their responses in the chat box.
Okay. So I'm going to take this down so I can see a little bit what may be coming in the chat. Do we have any responses? Are you all telling us that you have no challenges? Are we not able to get them into the chat? Rachel, do you have any advice for me here? Are we not connected? Okay. Uchi, thank you. Others? Capacity building. There's a nice challenge. Okay, so you can continue to put those in the chat, and I will take us a little bit into the conversation. So what I want to do is start, since Rachel has indicated that today's theme is leading. It's a very complex conversation. It's got a lot of history to it. And we've often made some confusions about what leading actually is. And so I would like to begin with sharpening the distinctions here. And that is the confusion that we make oftentimes is this distinction between authority in an organization and leading in an organization. They are not the same entity. All of us have some experience with this distinction, even if we haven't thought about it too much. Authority is about providing protection, direction, and the systems and processes in an organization to get work done. Oftentimes, authority is described, invested in the position that the person inhabits in the organization. So, for example, if I work in an organization and I have a position of some kind of authority and I leave the organization, and Rachel comes in and takes my position, she assumes the authority that I had in the role. So it's vested in the role. To some degree, you can make the case that authority and the org chart represent the map of that authority. So the higher up the organizational chart people go, the tendency is to have more authority in the position. Leading, on the other hand, as we're going to get into here in more detail in just a second, is really a choice and an activity, and it can come from anywhere in the system and often does. So what we all have an experience of somewhere, if we've been working long enough, is to be in an organizational setting where there was a need for some leadership, somebody to step up and take action. And we look up the org chart to those places of authority, expecting that somewhere up above us, that leading will occur, and it doesn't happen. We also have experiences, and I'm based on my time in this conference, I've witnessed it in chats, and it's probably true for everybody who's on this session, that you have had an experience where you've made a decision to lead on something, even if it didn't appear you had the requisite authority to do that leading. So you're a little bit out on the edge to some degree, but you chose to raise your hand and say something to the effect, I can do something about this, and I'm going to go forward with it. So what I want to put forward for us is that leading is a choice and an activity. And so let's define it, because Rachel asked us to put into the chat, what are some of the attributes of leading? And that's a very important start. But let's look at some definitions of leading from the perspective that I'm going to bring to this conversation. So leading is about mobilizing people to handle tough problems, And I'm going to emphasize throughout the conversation here this morning, mobilizing, which is getting people into action to address the challenging problems. That's the work of leading. Sometimes that's what authority can do, but oftentimes the big impact changes that we see in the world don't come from authority positions. They come from people who have made a decision to lead, and then their job is to get those people into action, organized coherently to take on those tough challenges. Another aspect of leading is we often have to disappoint people in doses that they can handle, which is to say that not everybody's going to get what they want in the process of doing the work. So a leader's job is to understand how people can keep moving in the cause that they're designed to mobilize for. Understand that some people are going to experience some losses and they're going to be disappointed, and know how to handle those and keep those people in the game, keep them moving. So this is the challenge of leading. It's not always something that people in authority do, but anybody who's been in the world of leading has some intimate familiarity with this. So let's look at some people that we're familiar with. Now, this is a group of people that have been one way or the other in the spotlight over the last 20 or 30 years. Up in the upper left-hand corner, this is Joshua Wong. For those of you who have been following the ongoing challenges of China and in particular Hong Kong, Joshua Wong was an outspoken critic of the party coming in, trying to take over Hong Kong, put himself at some great risk, he and his colleagues. Down below, you all know Malala. She has been an advocate for women's rights for a long time in her country and around the world. She's won the Nobel Peace Prize for that. In the upper right corner is Rosa Parks, who comes from my country, the United States, and she was the woman who refused to get off the bus in Birmingham, Alabama in the 60s in a segregated time, and was an instigator in a positive way for the changes that have gone on around equality in the United States. Down below is the great man, Nelson Mandela. We all know Nelson Mandela's story. He spent most of his adult time in prison, never lost the faith, never gave up on the cause. And when he was finally released and became president of South Africa, went on to actually put into play all the things that he advocated. And then in the middle is Greta Thunberg. Greta's probably most recently the most well-known of the people on this screen. We know her because she skipped school one day and did not get permission from her parents and started to protest and get active in climate change. And the thing that's relevant here and the thing that I want to put forward to you is none of these people had anywhere near the requisite authority in their system to do the work that they did until Nelson Mandela was finally elected, officially invested with authority as president. All these other people have been creating social change because they made a decision that an issue that they cared about needed action, and they were somebody who wanted to do something about it. And so they bear in mind and help us understand that leading begins as a choice and then an activity, and that primary activity is to mobilize people to get into action, to do the work of whatever the cause is. So I want to share with you for a moment, what are the actual principles that it takes to back up the choice of leading? First of all, leading is a choice and an activity. It's not a position. Ideally, in an org chart, people with a lot of authority will also choose to lead, and so they'll match those together. And when that happens, we have something pretty potent going on. Nelson Mandela would be a classic example of that. Once he was in position with authority, he took his leadership skills, combined them with his authority, and got the country into action. Easier to do in that position than being outside, but that didn't stop him from getting to that place where he could be in that position. Anyone can lead anywhere, anytime. So the question that I have for you, and I want to put this to you now, when you look at your challenges that you're facing, I want to challenge you to begin to think about, A, are you choosing to lead on this issue? If so, great. If not, why not? Where is your leading opportunities going to come? So these are questions that we'll play with during the next 30 or 40 minutes here as we go along. Leading starts with you, and it has to engage other people. It has to engage other people. It has to mobilize other people for the cause. So what we're talking about here is, in this conversation, is what it takes. What we're beginning to address is, what is the capacity that a person needs? What are the skills that they need in order to be able to start a movement, keep it moving, and have impact on the cause that they want to pursue? But they're going to get that work done through other people, not just themselves. So there needs to be a way to engage. That means most people who choose to lead, in my experience, could do a lot better at understanding how to craft narratives that engage people and address the issues that they have, so they understand what the opportunities are. So one of the craft skills for leading is your ability to tell stories and create narratives that resonate with people, that cause them to lean in and be interested in the movement that you're going to foster and actions they may take. Leading is risky, and you can get hurt. And I think it's important to have this on this list. It's been a while since we heard from Joshua Wong. And the reason we're not hearing from him is the Chinese government made it very clear that if he didn't stop talking, they were going to take action. And Joshua's probably made a wise decision for the time being to put himself on the sidelines until he feels like he can continue to follow the movement and produce it without risking harm or health to himself. He does this no good if he's not able to be in the game. So you understand that sometimes leading is a risky proposition, And that's important to take into account when you're making these decisions. And the last one is leading is about taking on the toughest challenges. Most of the challenges that we face are technical, and sometimes they're very straightforward. And that's what we'll get into next. So let me go forward here. Leading starts when wicked problems show up on our lives. So this conference is about the Sustainable Development Goals. Each one of those goals is specifically targeted, in my opinion, to address a wicked problem that exists in the world, an intractable challenge that if we don't get grip on, the world will suffer for it. This particular conference has identified gender equality as the focal point. You know probably much better than me how long we've been grappling with this, what kind of progress we've made, and what the work is that needs to be done. I'm going to argue that Sophia and the folks at EWEI decided to hold this conference as a convening to gather like-minded people in one place over a period of time and bring in new ideas from people like myself so that you could bolster your capacity with more skill, more ideas, and more resources to go back into the work and deal with gender equality with new and fresher ideas than what you had you not attended this conference. So this convening of this program over the course of a month is a wonderful place, I think, for people to participate on a regular basis and bolster those skills and capacity. So there are still sessions left. I hope you join some of those because every one of them is packed full of ideas. So there are challenges, and then there are challenges, and they are different. There are two basic boxes of problems. One box is technical problems. These are problems that have a pretty specific answer. Doesn't mean that they're going to be easy, but we can get it fixed. The other one is what I'm calling wicked or swamp problems. These are the problems that are intractable, that plague us. They've been around for a long time, and our measure of success is progress on them. So what I'd like to do is give you some sharper distinctions on the nature of these problems. Let's start with technical problems. So let's use a current event that we've all been experiencing for the last 2+ years, and that is COVID. Now, prior to COVID, and then when it started to run across the planet, the race was on for vaccination discoveries. And if you followed that process in the early days of COVID, what we all learned is that generally speaking, it can take 4 to 5 to 6 years to develop a provable vaccine. And so the concern was we might be chased by COVID for a good long time before we have a vaccine because vaccines are hard. Well, what we now then witnessed was within about 6 months, 3 different companies produced 3 different vaccines that they could get out to the world. So it turns out that vaccine design is not a wicked problem. It's a technical problem because they're able to get this out and not only get it discovered and perfected, but they also figured out a pretty quick distribution system to get it as far as they could in the world as quickly as they can, in addition to the boosters. So technical problems, they live in our heads, meaning we have knowledge and information about how we can test this on. We have experience. That's our second item. So we've been here before. We've seen this. Maybe it looked a little different, but we have some experience. We know some things that work and some things that don't work. And so we have some capacity to move at pace when we're dealing with a technical problem. It also lives in our logic systems, which is to say it stands up to rigor and testing. And the feedback loops that we get can be pretty tight and pretty clean and allows us to keep progressing on this challenge until we get it solved. So I'm going to suggest that all of you who've gone to university or gone to the School of Hard Knocks, which is oftentimes a tuition-free experience that we can learn a lot more from than university, you all have experience with dealing with technical problems one way or another, and you've actually developed some capacity to have great success with them. That's essential. We need that. You got to hold on to that. Now, the second kind of problem is a wicked problem. And a wicked problem persists as a gap between what we espouse and what's actually happening in the world. What we say we want and what the world is actually delivering. So it turns out that the wicked problem as related to COVID wasn't vaccine distribution, it was getting people vaccinated. Because people were making all sorts of different choices about should I, shouldn't I, that for some people seemed to defy logic, but for other people made complete sense. So we had a social impact consequence here to getting vaccines up into the arms of people, because a lot of people didn't think it made sense for them to do that. And we had to honor that choice and keep wrestling with this challenge. I think that on the gender equality side, there's still some espousing about how it should be. And what we know is what's actually happening in different parts of the world, in different places and cities. It's not that. And so our work as people who are on the job trying to deal with gender equality is to understand those differences and what that gap is so that we're more effective at fulfilling on that gap. The gap is what keeps us awake and lives in our stomachs. It gnaws at us. It's irritating. We're trying to figure out a way forward on it. And oftentimes our actions get rebuffed. So the thing I want to say, and I want to look at the chat here for a second, is that technical problems and wicked problems are oftentimes combined. They can be nested. They can be problems that are tangled. And so part of our challenge as people who are choosing to lead is to develop our capacity to diagnose the nature of the problems more effectively than what we might have in the past. So we need to be able to untangle and pull out the technical problems and go to work on those, and then spend different kinds of resources of time, energy, and often money to address the more complex, wicked social problems that we've got to deal with, because they're going to take more time and they're going to cause us fits and starts. We're going to make some progress, then we're going to have some failures, and we're going to have to revert and go backwards in order to make up ground that we had previously gained to go forward. That's the nature of dealing with a complex and wicked problem. Any questions for me at this point? So far, so good. Rachel, do you see any questions?
Yes, Rick. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can drop your questions in the chat box so far. We have lots of questions on WUVA, and so maybe we'll answer that at the end of the session.
Okay.
But presently, if you have any questions, you can drop in the comment box or chat box.
So let's go ahead, and then as the questions come in, or the questions that you're collecting in the other space, then we can deal with those at the end. How's that? Okay, so let me go through a few more bits here, and then we can go to the questions. So with the context of wicked problems and technical problems in mind, I just want to return to these 5 people, because this is the dynamic that they've all had to struggle with. I'm going to use Greta as an example, because I think this for her was the biggest challenge, which was it was empirically logical to her that climate change is an issue that the whole world needed to start paying a lot of attention to and spending a lot of resources on. And her challenge became taking the approach to addressing this by just explaining the logic of climate warming, global warming to people would be enough for them to decide, okay, I'm on board. Well, it turned out that wasn't exactly the way it happened. And it's taken her a while to figure out that what she's asking a lot of people to do is give up a lot of things that they're quite familiar with, that help their life be comfortable, that they believe they've worked very hard to achieve and therefore they deserve. And along comes this person who says, you got to give up some of the stuff, maybe a lot of it, if we're all going to make it through this climate change issue. So she struggled for quite a while. And if you listen to her language and her speaking from the time she began this work to today, she's still quite direct and she's still quite adamant about the cause and the challenges ahead. But she has also found different ways to try and mobilize those people for whom they have some resistance to this. And I think the work that she's doing well at this point is she has come to recognize that her request to get on board with climate change and make some changes personally means that these people are experiencing losses that they're quite concerned about losing, things that they've come to build their life around, and suddenly some of this stuff is going to go away. And what they were not hearing from her was, A, does she understand that they're going to experience loss? Does she have some empathy with the loss, whether it's logical or not? It's an emotion for them. Do people understand that that doesn't feel so good? And then two, the acknowledgement that they're understanding that that loss is happening. So the people that she's trying to mobilize are feeling heard. And then the third piece is there anything she can offer or that the climate change initiative can offer that is a substitute for the loss? Is there a way to make up some of this stuff? So as a leader, your challenge is to understand that what you're asking people to do is probably going to produce some personal or organizational loss for them. They want to have a sense that you understand that that's happening and that you're trying to account for it and you're giving space to be heard on that. And is there anything that you can bring to the conversation that is a bit of a counterbalance to the loss they're going to experience? Now, sometimes that doesn't exist. And that's just the hard work of making change around some of these issues. But to the degree there's something to offer, whether it's empathy or being heard or something tangible, it's an important element that a leader has to account for in order to keep the movement going. So let's look at the specifics of these two kinds of problems. On the one hand, we have technical problems, and the other one's the adaptive or wicked problems. So this is a pretty straightforward little document. If we go down technical problems, they're oftentimes clear. The solution is oftentimes clear. It may be hard to pull off, but it's still clear. Whose work is it? Well, we usually hire experts or authorities. So if I break my leg, I'm going to go see a doctor who's got an expertise in setting broken bones. I trust the expertise. I trust the repetitions and the experience that the doctor's had. It's not an adaptive, wicked, messy problem for a surgeon. It's a technical problem. The type of work means that it can be quite efficient. We can start, we got a middle, and we got an end, so we know where we are in the process. Oftentimes, the timeline's pretty fast, ASAP, or something close to that. The expectation is we can fix it. We can get it handled. And the attitude or the vibe that we pick up is confidence and skill, talent, expertise. So all of us are experts in something that we do in our work and in our lives. And we got that place because of the repetitions, because of the learning, because of the opportunities to work it. So we can be counted on to make good on challenges and problems that are technical and they fit into our area of expertise. Adaptive problems or wicked problems, first and foremost, require learning, and the solution requires learning. These are problems we haven't seen before, at least not well enough as opposed to the technical problems. Whose work is it? Well, it's a lot of people's work. There are stakeholders involved in dealing with, say, climate change or gender equality. And those stakeholders don't all share the same concerns. Those stakeholders don't share the same aspects of what they want out of it. There are what we would call factions in this larger system. And so if you're leading a kind of change that is adaptive, that is messy, it's important for you to understand who the different stakeholder groups are and what are their concerns, what are their wants, what are the losses. The difficult part here is it could be different for every group. And if you're trying to get these people on board, you're going to have to come up with slightly modified responses for each faction that makes up part of the whole. There's no clear pathway forward. So we got to take actions and run experiments. What works, what doesn't work, keep what works and get rid of what doesn't work, and then iterate again. We're in it for a longer term, no quick fixes. Expectations for people, particularly a lot of us who love to have quick answers. This progress is made over time. And so therefore patience, finding that tension between patience and movement is critical for a leader to be able to manage. And then the attitude is curiosity. What's ahead here? What can we learn from this? What's our feedback loops telling us? How do we iterate the process and go forward? All right, so I'm gonna wrap up here shortly what it is that I wanna say, and then we'll take some questions. So, how to start? So what I'm gonna suggest is, provocatively maybe for some of you, those 5 people that I had on the slide could easily be 5 of you in this room, or all of you in this room. All of you have made some decision in your career here to do hard work around impact and making behavioral change and cultural changes to large groups of people. And that's very difficult work. So what I want to suggest and remind you is some of the things you've either already done unconsciously, or you can start doing by design. So where to start if you're going to raise your hand and choose to lead on some of these intractable issues? The first one, it's always the first one, is you need to authorize yourself to lead. You need to give yourself permission. You need to find it in you, that voice that says, I can do this. I'm willing to put myself into this position. I'm willing to raise my hand and take a stand and see if I can bring people along. Lots of people are out there looking, who's gonna take us there? Who's gonna lead us there? Might as well be you. So it begins with you giving yourself permission and your own authority to use yourself as a leader. That's step number 1. The second start is to begin with the challenge. Avoid getting yourself all wrapped up in trying to find systems and processes and structures that you think you're gonna need to take on the challenge. It's likely they won't be the ones you need when it comes time to do the work. So the best thing to do is go face to face with the challenge and start to understand it better and start to play with it. Get your hands dirty in it a little bit and learn from it, because the challenge is going to be your educator. It's going to be your teacher. It's going to be your guide. And the sooner you get engaged with it, the more likely it is you're going to be able to start to learn and become wiser about what you can do. 3, start where you have influence. So you're going to take on some challenge. You're going to use yourself. Somewhere in this challenge, you have some kind of influence, some kind of voice, some kind of expertise, some kind of network of people who are already in place that you can start to mobilize for action. So scan the system that you're going to change and figure out where you're best suited to place yourself to get started and get moving. And that's a place where you can influence other people based on your experience, based on your ideas, based on your narrative, your passion, and the fact, honestly, that you raised your hand and decided, I'm going to lead on this. That will be a significant move for a lot of people, and they will be influenced by that because you've shown the gumption and the courage to take this on. Number 4, this is a hard one. It's hard for all of us. Start with your part of the mess. And I say that because every leader, every one of us, and you can just do your own inventory here. Each of us, no matter how well intended we are to address a big challenge, we are making some contribution to the mess we're trying to solve. And until as leaders, we're willing to do a self-reflective process and understand what I'm doing here that gets in the way of what I'm trying to pull off, I'm going to keep doing it. And it's going to be visible to the people I'm trying to mobilize, and it's going to be disheartening for them because they're going to invent an accurate story that says he or she doesn't get that they're part of the problem here. And so it's important to have people that matter to you that will tell you the truth and help you understand what your contribution to the mess is, so you can decrease that and eventually stop that. Now, as a leader, we're always finding some ways to get in our own way. And so we need those people, those people who will talk to us and give us straight feedback that we'll listen to and that we'll trust. This is a critical piece for all leaders. And the more that you can get effective at understanding that contribution and how you get in your way, the faster your pace will be. Start and engage other people. This is the work of mobilizing. And it is, you'll go as far as you can engage other people. If you only engage 5 people and you need a movement of 100, your pace is 5% of what it could be. And so you need to develop the craft and skills of engaging, mobilizing, bringing people along. And as I said, a lot of times that's conversation and narrative skills. And I'm going to suggest that there's a lot of resources out there, online, books that you can pick up that will help you understand what the art and science of storytelling and narrative work is, so that you can build that skill. It's not difficult. Most people are really poor at it, so it doesn't take you very much learning, reading, and practice to elevate your capacity above the crowd. Anybody that you've admired who has led difficult situations, if you do your own analysis of them, I'm going to be very surprised if they don't have good narrative skills and storytelling skills to mobilize people. All right, so that's how to start. A couple last things. I've said this a couple times. The goal of leading is making progress. Keep making progress on the cause. The cause that you're in may outlive your capacity to work on it. It may outlive your life expectancy. And so what you're doing is you're working for future generations, and your goal is to keep making progress and to demonstrate that progress is being made to your followers, to the people around you, but most important to the people ahead of you, who will understand that there is a way forward, because the track record and the path that they're getting on board with is an example of the progress that they've made over the course of time. So this requires patience. It requires determination. Sometimes it requires just a stubbornness to not give up. People won't understand it, and you just got to persevere. But the measure of success in leading on some of these intractable problems is to make progress. All right, 3 questions to end, and then we can take some questions or some comments from the chat, Rachel. So I'm going to leave these to you to think about. How will you use yourself to lead? How will you do it? Where will you begin? Who's going to go with you on this? Who's going to go with you? This is the mobilization part. And then the last piece is a critical piece, and oftentimes something that's hard for us to do if we're alone, is hold on to optimism. We all could be a little better at this one. And it's, I would suggest, if you do nothing else, after you've determined what issues you're going to take on and you're going to make the choice to lead, build yourself a tight little community of people who are optimistic, and you can use each other to keep yourselves in the game. So hold on to optimism. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop the sharing. And I want to thank you for enduring my conversation here. I feel like I've talked longer than I definitely want to talk, but I'm now glad to answer questions or comments that may come from the group. Rachel.
Okay, thank you very much. The first question I would want to address.
Rachel, I can't hear you. You're muted.
So the first question, yes, I would want to address is, as regards, you talked about leading and authorizing. Is there a difference between leadership and management? Because some people claim it's different, some think it's the same.
Yeah, I think it's a little different. Management, I'm going to suggest that management is about the coordination of organizational resources, be they people, systems, processes, products, services, in an efficient way to get work done so that some customer base, some client base can actually benefit from the product. So managers tend to keep things moving on time and according to specification. Leading tends to be about the future and what we're going to do or how we're going to deal with difficult challenges that pop up in the work that we're doing that now interrupts our efficiencies. It's a blurred line. Sometimes you'll find people who are both managing and leading, but they are oftentimes doing two different kinds of work when they're in that position.
Okay, thank you so much. So as regards starting with your part of the mess, there's a question here that says, how do you use yourself to lead? Because we tend to learn more from our leadership failures than our successes. What have you learned from such failures? So how do you use yourself to lead? And how do you learn from your failures as a leader?
And are they asking me this for myself? Is that for me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the first thing is you're not supposed to ask me these questions, that's not fair. All right, so it's a fair question. It's a question I ask. I have a podcast and I ask everybody on my podcast this very question. So what have I learned from my attempts at leading? The first thing I learned early on was I was not very good at storytelling and narrative. I used too much logic. I just thought it was obviously clear that whatever I was saying made sense to people and they would just get on board. And it didn't make sense to them. It's some people, but not enough to foster a movement. So I had to come to grips with, and I met a person who was quite good at narrative, of figuring out how to put their self in the other person's position and figure out how to speak to them from that position. And so they worked at that. That was a skill set that they developed. So I had to do some work to build the skill of storytelling and narrative. And that's made a difference, honestly, in terms of the pace. Another weakness I have is I don't ask for help. I tend to do everything myself. So that doesn't scale very well. I can only do so much myself. And so I had to get over a notion that asking for help was a sign of weakness, and that if I really wanted to have bigger impact, I needed to create partnership and work together. Part of the reason why I didn't want to ask for help was I didn't want to share. I thought I knew everything that there was to know about it, and I just wanted people to do what I told them to do. And that didn't work. It didn't scale. People didn't want to be told. They wanted to be engaged. They wanted to be asked. And so I had to learn how to do that better than what I did before. Now, there's a whole bunch of others, but I'm going to stop there for the moment.
Okay, thank you so much, Rick. That was very concise, and I'm sure a lot of participants can relate to that because I equally could relate to that. So another question is, what is the best method of leadership practice? Because people tend to say that there are different ways to lead. So what is the best method of leadership practice?
Yeah, it's a very important question because I think the emphasis in this question is on practice. And by that, I'm going to say the design of the practice. So therefore, practice can be either a noun or a verb. In this case, as a noun, it's a construction of a thing. And so the first thing I do when I, with the clients I work with, when we're trying to develop capacity, is to understand capacity building takes time. And so there's no quick fixes here. So we're in it for the long haul. And so practice means we need to design and understand the skill we're trying to build. So let's say I'm trying to be a better listener and I'm trying to become more curious. So we can actually, in the work of building that skill, locate with that person places in their daily life. If they're in an organization and they have meetings and they lead meetings, they have set periods of time every week where they know they're going to be with people, and it's an opportunity to ask questions and then ask more questions and ask more questions. So you can design the work you're trying to do inside the daily activities of your job. So that's one thing. And so what we're looking for there is to get lots of repetitions So we're getting practice. So anything that we are good at, we've done through practice and repetition over time. We learn to walk that way. We learn to talk that way. We learn to keyboard. We learn to sing. We learn to play an instrument. We learn to be good at athletics by practice, repetition, coaching, and feedback over time. So the elements you want to have is a platform. You want to have a thing you're building. You want to practice it over time. You want to get feedback, and you want to get some coaching. You put those ingredients together, then you will have pace and you'll build some skill rather quickly.
Okay, thank you so much. You told us about, you mentioned your podcast. It would be nice if you can share the name of the podcast so we can equally join and listen up. You can put it in the chat box.
Well, let me do it right here.
Okay.
Okay, so the podcast is called 10,000 Swamp Leaders. You can find it at that website. You can also find it on Google, Spotify, iHeart, really any place where their podcasts are available. You'll be able to find it there. The podcast is directed, it has two purposes. One is there's a lot of people who've made this decision to lead in really difficult, or what I would call swampy issues. Therefore, they're swamp leaders in my vernacular. And they're quite modest about their accomplishment, but their stories need to be told and they need to have a place to tell them. So the podcast purpose is to bring these people on, and I talk to them and ask them questions about how they've done what they've done, what they've learned, what advice do they have. The second part of the reason is I know that there is a younger group of people on the trail of building leadership capacity. And if they should listen to these people's stories, they'll pick up some ideas that they can use that will move their development along faster. And so it serves those two audiences. It's a pretty diverse group of people that I've had on. They've done all sorts of different kinds of things, but what holds them together is they've made a decision to lead. They've become quite decent at it. They have some stories. To your question, they'll talk about their failures and what they've learned from it. So you can find it in those places. I also have a book out, just came out about 2 months ago, called Leading is Always a Choice. And you can find that online at Amazon and Noseberry and other places as well. It's a pretty easy read. It's not very big, not very technical.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for the book recommendations, because I was about to ask for book recommendations as well. So Uche
I will
question.
hang on one second. I will make one. I was going to say, I'll just make one other book recommendation. I'll put it in the chat too. It's a book about adaptive leadership, which I'll put in the chat. Okay, go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Uche says, what do you do when you find yourself in a situation where you were supposed positive feedback are not adhered? So you give positive feedback, but they are not adhered.
So is the question that I'm giving the feedback and it's not being heard, or I'm not hearing the feedback coming from? I'm not sure I understand.
You're giving feedback, but the person you're giving the feedback to does not take the feedback, does not learn from the feedback or adjust.
Yeah, okay, so there's a couple different possible scenarios here. Rachel, let's pretend it's you and me. So I work for you, you're my manager. And so inherent in that relationship is the manager is going to give the people on the team feedback for their development and to get better at their job. That's part of the work contract. And there is no high performance in a team without timely, relevant feedback. So if I have a good manager, if you're a good manager, not only do I understand that you're going to give it to me, I want it because that's how I get better faster. Now, I am hoping that you can give me feedback in a way I can take it, but it's still part of the contract. So if that's the relationship here, and I'm the manager and I'm giving feedback, but the person I'm giving feedback to is not taking it in, I'm now we have a different conversation on our hands, because this is part of how the team, this is a team standard, and this is how we get better. And so you need to play by the ways in which the organization designed their team performance. So there's a greater consequence to ignoring the feedback if it's that. On the other hand, if it doesn't have that relationship, if it's peer to peer, for example, that's a little different. And I don't necessarily have to take it in because I don't work for you or we're equals. I think the question becomes, did I ask for the feedback? One, if I didn't ask for the feedback and you're giving it to me, yeah, I have every right to reject that. So the question is, did I ask for it, or do we have an agreement to have a conversation about that before I do it? If it's unsolicited, if you come to me, we're peers, and you start giving me feedback on something, I didn't ask for it, and you didn't ask for permission, we're probably going to have a challenge because we're peers, we're equals, you know, and I need to feel like I'm a partner in this conversation, not just being told. So I think it depends on that dynamic as much as anything.
Yes, evidently seems to. So another question is, what do you do in a situation where one sees his or herself as a figurehead? What he or she is meant to do, someone else takes charge.
We're seeing that unfold right now in the United Kingdom. This is exactly what's happening if you're following the news, with Liz Truss as the Prime Minister and Jeremy Hunt as the Chancellor. It's a difficult situation because if it is in fact somebody in the organization is at the top, and generally speaking, if they're a figurehead, I'm going to suggest they're probably not so much leading as they are somebody in some position of authority. That's how they get that distinction. Probably it's part of the position. Are they filling that role as authority, much less leading? You know, if not, then it could be a figurehead and people are not willing to take that on. That's a tough place to be because it's there for the whole world to see, including everybody in the organization. And mood, morale, enthusiasm for mission all pay a price for that. And somebody further up the system has to address that. It can't be done from people on the ground, generally speaking. They just don't have enough authority, and they can get hurt by taking that on.
Okay,
now,
okay.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so one other good question is, what do you do when you're always in trouble when you speak out? And are we encouraged to speak out, especially when you find yourself in an organizational setting?
All right, so there's a couple things there. One is, at the organizational level, it is entirely not surprising that I've seen a lot of organizations where it's not safe to speak out. You get hurt, or ultimately you can get fired. You're going to be terminated. And I would say in those kinds of settings, if I'm in a place like that, I understand that is how it is. I need to find another place to work, because that is a pretty toxic situation and it's not likely to change in the short term. And eventually it will start to affect me and I'll start to conform to that. So I would say it's the organizational level. If that's the part of the culture, then I would suggest you start burnishing your CV and start looking for a healthier place to spend your time and energy. Now, on the other hand, I think sometimes we got to be responsible for what comes out of our mouth. And one sort of rule of thumb there is, and you see this a lot, somebody will say something to somebody else and they'll take it the wrong way. And the person who said it said, oh, you're too sensitive, or something of that nature. And it's really just you, it's not me. And I think the healthier way to think about a response that comes from that is to ask myself or pose the question based on the meaning of my communication to you. Is the response it elicits in you independent of my intent? I have to, this is a sort of another way of saying, what's my contribution to the mess here? If you have a response to something that I say that's surprising to me and it's not good, I'd be wise. A wise leader would say, what am I saying here that's eliciting this response? Something's happening here that I have to own. And we need to talk about that. And how am I doing that? So I need to get feedback from you about how I'm communicating to you on that. It's a tough conversation for me to have because, I don't like to admit I got it wrong, but I think it's a good healthy diagnosis for somebody who wants to lead well, is to find out if people are reacting oddly to their conversations, they have a hand in that. And if it's not useful for work getting done, then you need to sort it. And it needs to start with me.
Okay, thank you very much. That is good. There's equally a question that says, do you believe in the school of thought that says he who doesn't accept corrections should not correct?
I think the school of hard knocks is going to make sure that's true. I mean, it doesn't take very long. Uchi, you probably, I'm guessing you have some experience with this in some way, shape, or form. If I can't do what I'm asking you to do, then my credibility as a manager, or a leader, or somebody in authority is going to dwindle rather quickly. And people are either going to leave my team or my organization, or the organization is going to move me along. Yeah, I think there's some integrity of, there's an integrous part of managing and leading that says, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do myself, or I haven't already done in my past. And I actually know a little bit about how to do it, and I can coach you about how to do it well. So in the absence of that, yeah, trust is undermined and it's hard to get that back.
Okay. So there is a saying that goes, there is no office hours for a leader. How do you think that is true? There are no office hours for a leader? And how does a leader balance being a leader and equally other aspects of his or her life?
So there's a couple parts there. I know a lot of leaders who are really great at balancing their life, and they have stops. They have I know one leader whose rule is, when I get in the car to drive home, I leave everything at the office there, barring an emergency, because I'm returning to my family. So they have a sort of a trigger called getting in the car that is a partition that they've set up. I know other people for whom they're on their phones, at midnight, chasing things, and their kids and their spouses, pay a price for that. So I think that, I think it is a mental health conversation, not a strategy conversation, not an execution conversation. It's a mental health conversation, because eventually somebody who has no office hours, so to speak, if 24 hours a day, 7 days a week are the office hours, it's going to be consequential, not just to the organization, but to the people around you that you care about. And so I think in healthy organizations, they have rules, they have guidelines. And if you're the person at the top of the organization, people will take their direction from you. And so if you're balanced and you advocate some kind of balance, people will follow that. If you're not balanced and you advocate balance, they won't follow that. They'll follow you and what you do, because that's how they think they either get ahead or that's how they survive. So it fits into that category of, your actions speak so loud, your words mean nothing to me. So as a leader, you got to understand everything you do is watched and observed and interpreted, and meaning is made of it. And so if you want people to be balanced, you got to show up balanced.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, so is Sophia out there? Are you out there?
Yes, I am. Rick.
Yes, she's here.
You've been eavesdropping on me.
Yes, I have.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be eavesdropping into the sessions for the last week and a half. And it's been even a bigger pleasure to be in this position, although challenging, I will say.
Absolutely. I think just for everyone to know, Rick is my coach, and he's been amazing. And he always puts a mirror up in front of me. It's like, okay, you have this issue. What is your contribution to the issue? So he promotes that. And I have a question. Over to you, Rick.
All right, go ahead.
What has been one of the most challenging leadership issues that you have experienced and supported a person with, knowing that issues can be very diverse, but really one of those wicked problems? Maybe an example of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to speak in general terms here, but I think the conditions will speak for itself. I had a client who was quite a senior leader in a good sized organization. And he was very bright, very strategic. He went on to be quite successful in the federal government of the United States in the Obama administration. But this was prior to that. But he was very, very conflict averse. He had really no skills at it. And he had an individual, a senior leader on his team, who figured that out rather quickly and could work him. So that was a hard thing by itself, just to figure out that he was lacking the gumption and some skill to have difficult conversations with this person and hold his ground, because there was a lot of toing and froing around budgets and stuff like that. And he was getting pushed around. So that was one issue. But the bigger issue that emerged was this other individual had been quite abusive to people on the team in all sorts of different ways. And he was completely unprepared for that and didn't have any idea about how to address it. But the real issue for him was, how did that happen on his watch and not know about it? And so there's a skill building thing about how to facilitate the conversation and really the exit out of the organization, which he got help with through me and through his HR people. But the real issue for him was this blind spot of abuse going on in his organization and his team that he did not know, and that people didn't feel safe enough to come and talk to him about. And that really set him back for about a year, because he doubted everything about who he was and what he stood for. And everything was in question for him. He was pretty hard on himself. And there's external circumstances that he couldn't control. But the hardest thing was sort of helping him put himself back together again from these lessons that he experienced. And it took quite a while. And I would say he made great progress. He moved on. But I had a conversation a couple of years ago, and it still sticks with him. It's never going to go away. It's a mark.
Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you so much. I would equally want to ask, does leadership translate to you not getting scared? Does being a leader mean you have to always have everything under control?
Sophia, you want to take this one? No, it does not mean that at all. No,
No, thank you.
It's about being able to move and function when you are nervous and scared. I mean, there are times when you must take action, and you're not certain, or this is deeper water than you've been in so far, and you're actually having to tread and swim to keep yourself above until you can find something solid to stand on. I think what's needed there is the practice. You've been practicing for these moments. You've been getting ready for these moments. So you've been following a practice of some kind. You have, like Sophia said, you have somebody that you can talk to, whether it's an external coach or peers in a thought group that you have of equals that you can bounce these things off of. But there are always going to be a challenge that comes up that's bigger than what you've experienced before. And I think what gets people through it is an understanding of who they are under pressure, where they can, what I would call leak oil. We all leak oil under pressure. But the grace is in the speed of the response on that, not having it wipe us out. So understanding that is really critical, and then following a practice where you know that you're building greater capacity to handle these higher levels of challenge. Because as you move in your career, if you move up, inherent with that upward movement is a deeper level of challenges, then you might not be ready for all of them. And you're going to have to learn on the job. So the practice, the coaching, the feedback, the repetition, and the resiliency are all what get you through that.
Oh, thank you so much, Rick. So you can continue to drop your questions in the chat box and equally on the WUVA platform where our speaker, Rick Torseth, would respond to you. Before we conclude, I don't know if there are more questions coming in. If not, Rick, can you give us your last word, a word of advice for upcoming leaders or people who aspire to lead in their organizations, or people who are equally leading in their organizations? What's the best strategy?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to say is I just want to thank you all for making the choice to deal and commit yourself personally and professionally in your capacities and your talents to take on the challenges that you're taking on. These are a lot harder than making cars or making computers. My podcast is 10,000 Swamp Leaders because I think we need at least 10,000 more people like you all, just to give us a fighting chance to make progress on these things. So I would say, don't go alone. You know, we all heard the deal. You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. That's a pithy thing, but it's really true. But you have to be deliberate about the design of the tribe you're going with. You want to find people who have equal amount of aspiration and commitment to their development and taking care of themselves and helping other people in that group take care of themselves as you go together. That may mean you're not in the same organization. You could be peers in different kinds of organizations, but with the same leadership and management challenge. And so you can use thought leaders and partners for there. I think that if you go alone, you're going to struggle and it will probably take you out eventually. So it's very important to find peers and partners, some way, shape, or form that will support you and give you tough feedback when you need to hear it.
Thank you so much, Rick. Do not go alone. Find peers and partners. That is very important. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay, so thank you so much, participants, for joining this session. You can continue to drop your comments, your questions in the chat box, particularly on the WUVA platform. Our speaker, Rick, will be there to respond to you, and you can equally interact with other participants. So our poll will be coming up soon to evaluate this session and get to know what you think about the session and how impactful it has been. Thank you so much, Rick. It was personally very enlightening for me. I wish this session would go on and on. Okay, so Rick, the tech team, the communications team will reach out to you on how to navigate WUVA.
Great, thank you.
So thank you so much. Participants are sending in their thanks and they enjoyed the session as well. Thank you so much, Rick.
Are we having a photo?
Yes.
Before
okay, before he goes. Once the poll comes down, we're going to have a photo session.
A photo session. It's not just one picture. It's a whole photo thing, huh?
So panelists, panelists get ready so you can put on your camera once the poll goes down.
Oh, Sophia's going to join us. Yes. It's been a long time since I actually saw
So
you. That's
panelists-
good.
True. I finally submitted, so next week I'm gonna,
Oh,
I'm
nice.
going to schedule.
Good. Congratulations on that. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
So am I posing for a picture here? Is that what I'm doing?
Ye-
Can I like put my arms around both of you or something like that? I don't know if I can do that online. I don't know how that works.
Okay,
is
so
this the
however
whole-
you want to do it.
So hold on a second. Is this the team?
This is
Sophia,
some of the team,
Some of the team.
the team, not
Nice.
everyone.
nice to meet you all. I've been hearing about you all for quite a while. It's nice to see real people here. Am I going to get a
Okay, so
picture?
the pictures are being taken. Yes, they are being taken. Okay, so we're good. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining us. And I equally want to say a big thank you to the backup team for being here and ensuring that the conference continues to go on. So participants, you can complete the poll, drop your questions on the Woover platform, and we will respond to you. Our next session is slated for 1:15 p.m. West African time. 1:15 p.m. West African time. So you can stick around or go about, stretch, and come back. By 1:15 West African time, our second session will commence, and it's on women and leadership. Thank you so much for joining this session.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye all.